Alright guys, I've gotten a lot of interest in my grom build with the sidecar, and I figured I'd go ahead and just kind of put a quick little video together since I get so many questions. And I mean, nothing I've done isn't already on the internet, but just kind of put this together, quick and easy breakdown of the bike and what all I've done to it and to get the sidecar to work. And anyway, so here it is. It's a leaning sidecar. I'm pretty sure I'm the first one that's built one of these. Ignore my dogs. They know I'm out here and they hate whenever I'm on the bike. But anyway, there's already one sidecar out there, but like I said, it's a fixed sidecar. I guess I'll run down through the differences between a fixed versus a leaner. So obviously a leaner bike keeps most of its regular drivability. Still works just like a regular bike, just has a sidecar attached essentially, so you can actually still rock the bike back and forth. I guess it's coming down to preference for that, if you want that or not. Some people prefer, to have like a fixed sidecar because it has a completely different feel to it. Just kind of the classic sidecar feel. Me personally, I needed the biggest reason I switched to a leaner is because it allows me to attach and detach the sidecar really quick and easy because I daily my bike. So every now and then I need to just come home, go get some groceries, just throw the sidecar on, run and go get the groceries, come back. The other day I actually went and picked up like a 40-pound bag of dog food and came right home, no problem. The other changes are that it's much more sensitive to loads whenever you have a fixed sidecar. So basically you set your geometry between the bike lean versus sidecar angle and your toe and all that based on whenever you have a full load in it. Whereas on this, it's a lot less sensitive to those types of changes because the sidecar is kind of on its own independent setup, whereas with a fixed, it's all kind of one piece. Let's see what else I have here. I guess negatives of one of these leaners is that you have this whole extra subframe here extended out, so that way you don't hit the car whenever you lean over. So it makes the bike and the whole assembly much wider. So it takes a little bit of getting used to that extra width. And one benefit of a fixed sidecar is they typically do a little bit better in bad weather conditions because they have that extra planted wheel. Whereas this, because it still leans, if you can actually still have your bike slide out on you and you fall into the sidecar, basically making it into a mousetrap. So typically I'd try not to ride in bad weather, which today, as I'm starting to make this video, it's starting to rain. So anyway, just kind of some other notes on how you decide whether you want a fixed or a leaner. Now granted, I think it'd be very easy to convert this into a fixed by basically just adding in another attachment somewhere in this area that basically just kind of locks it into place rather than letting it lean. And it's not hard to use, like I've done with everything else on it, is just use a little turnbuckle and that'll help you get your angle right. But like I said, that goes into a lot more geometry stuff. All this is online. Just have to do a little research. Because that's basically what I did. I just did a bunch of research and just trying to make a quick little summary of everything I've looked into. So for the design of it, I made it a little bit overly complicated because my original plan was to have this red piece as kind of a adaptable setup to where I could convert it from a sidecar to a trailer. I just haven't gotten around to doing the trailer part. I'm not sure if I even really want to at this point because I just really like the way the sidecar is. If I do a trailer, it'll probably be a different setup. Like I probably won't even use this frame anymore. And I've got a lot of interest in people wanting to buy these, so I kind of built this just you know, flying seat of pants, and so I didn't really have any measurements of a whole lot of stuff written down. But if I did build these, I would have to, well, I would simplify it and basically make it a single piece. For the suspension, whenever I initially built it, it's all just using a typical TTR 125 linkage setup originally, where the wheel actually bolted directly to the linkage. The problem I had with that is that it was insanely stiff. Since then, I've actually rebuilt a whole new swing arm setup. It's very, very rough, but it works. And it has a suspension where basically I can, if I push down right here with all my weight, I can actually bottom it out. And that's another design aspect, I guess, is that you want the suspension to be as soft as you can do with whatever type of load you're going to be putting in it, because it transfers less of that feedback into your handlebars when you ride. So I have a couple different settings I can move my wheel to, but then again, that comes into another design aspect, which is how much of a lead you have from your sidecar wheel to your rear wheel. The general rule of thumb on a bigger bike is between 200 to 300 millimeters, which is roughly 8 to 12 inches. On this, I'm actually running around 150. And that mermaid just pulled up. Let's see. There's actually a few threads on these builds. There's another guy that built a monkey version of this shortly after I did mine. And the big issue I have is that you want the center line, you want the mounting points to actually be in the center line of the bike, which on this you can see I'm pretty far off from that. So that does have a little bit of an effect on how the bike handles. Basically, the pivot rotation is different line than what the bike does. So it kind of, I don't know, it kind of changes whether you're going right or left. I don't know, I'm not really sure how to explain that without going into a whole engineering background, but the more you go to the center, the more consistent it's going to be, and the less it's going to affect the bike. And then another thing is, whenever you accelerate and brake, having the center line off like this affects how much it pulls and pushes whenever you so when you accelerate, you actually have to turn away from the sidecar to kind of pull the dead wheel forward, and whenever you brake, the wheel's trying to continue going forward, so you have to actually turn into the sidecar. And that happens a lot less if you have it in the center line. And then the last aspect of design on it is, this is kind of like a standard, a lot of people play with this, is how much you actually have your pivot points offset. I think roughly the most common one I've seen whenever I did my research was around 9.5 degrees, and I'm kind of near that area. And what that helps is, whenever you turn, having that one higher off the ground, whenever you turn, it actually pushes the wheel to turn the same direction as you're leaning. So I don't know if y'all will be able to see this very well, but whenever I lean, the wheel actually pivots out, and whenever I come back to the right, it actually turns back in. So that basically takes a lot of the stress off of the steering, whereas if you have a fixed sidecar, it kind of fights you whenever you try and go back straight. So I think that's about it for my summary on it. Now, as far as how it actually rides, you actually really don't notice the sidecar too much whenever you're riding. It does have a little bit of a shake in the bars whenever you're accelerating, but once you get to a steady state, you don't even really feel the car there anymore. Like I already mentioned, there's a little bit of a learning curve around the braking and accelerating, and then also having to figure out whenever you come to a stop, it's typically a little bit easier if you put your left foot out versus your right foot, because there's a whole cage there. I have a few times gotten to where I put my foot on the the cage and kind of balance it. The problem is whenever you try and start going again, you typically forget to take your foot off and put it on the peg, and it gives you a really weird feeling of like the sidecar pivoting and bouncing. And then also, of course, you don't have your rear brake anymore whenever you do that. But for top speed, I've had it up to about 57 miles an hour. On that same stretch of road, I've gone up to about 65, 66. Maybe a little bit less than that. But it's completely comfortable with me and about 30 or 40 pounds of weight in the car. I can do about 45 to somewhere between 45 to 50 pretty well. It's a little bit stressed. That's the other thing, is I guess whenever you're accelerating, you typically always have to use a little more revs. I actually have a lightened oil spinner. I'm actually probably going to go back to stock, because I think that's hurting me whenever it comes to my cruise, because it just doesn't want to hold the speed as well. But that's not really into the sidecar debate. I've also considered doing a big bore just to help tote it along a little bit better. But that's neither here nor there. That's just kind of stuff I want to do eventually. And also probably upgrade the brakes, because it is a lot more mass, and you definitely feel it and when you're braking. I think braking is probably actually the time that you feel it the most. Accelerating, you just feel kind of like you just have a heavy load on the bike. Whenever you're braking, though, you feel like that the whole weight of it just kind of pushing towards the front. It's not terrible, but you do feel it. I think that's really about it. Just give me a second here and I'll pull out the wrench and show y'all how easy it is to attach and detach. Alright, so I moved it in because it started raining. Anyway, so basically all you need to take it off is one tool. So 1 1/8 inch drive wrench, because I'm using 3/4 inch bolt. So all you do, pop that one loose, front, back, back over here. Alright, and then it just all drops all right off. There you go. Just walk away. If you want to put it back on, it's a little bit tricky sometimes. But cart's pretty light, so it's not too bad. I usually start at the rear. Just get that first one threaded in. Turns. Alright, and then one other little thing, that whenever you are tuning everything to set up right, you do also want to adjust your toe. And if you're trying to adjust your toe, now would be the time that you have the rear connected and the front loose. You just break this jam nut, toe out, toe in. It's pretty simple, nice and easy. And actually I don't lock it until I've already put the car back on, just so I get the angle in the best possible position, because otherwise you will kind of run into the end of these end links, especially on the rear one. Because you can also do the same adjustment on the rear, but unfortunately, like, whenever I built this, it kind of got a little bit wonky, so basically the rear is completely maxed out and I had to actually completely remove the jam nut, but I still have the adjustment I need for on the front. Just like that. And torque this down, this one down, come back to the rear, and turning this one all the way down. And that's it, it's attached. So, I mean, you can see that was very, very quick. Probably less than 5 minutes going on and off. And that's it. I'm probably going to get a few more questions about like how I attached it and stuff like that. So I guess I'll just go ahead and kind of do a few more close-ups. So this right here, I've actually attached the rear point to the same shaft that is used for the rear set. It turns out it's actually the same exact size as the handlebar, so I was able to just, it's the 7/8. So I actually just bought a bar from a Chinese bike, kind of a universal, and just bolted it on right here. It's kind of janky, but it works. I haven't had any issues with it. Whenever I initially did it, I actually had 2 of them to kind of get them more balanced, because I had like a bar coming across, but that was because my clamp was way out here, and I've since moved it more inward to kind of get a little bit better handling in the, as I mentioned earlier. For the front, I mean, I actually have a KevTech sub cage, so I use that as one quick, easy attachment point. And then I've also got this clamp to there. Between the two of these, it kind of gives it a little more, I'm hoping a little more stability. You actually do want this as rigid as possible. If I were to do it with a bike without this, I would build an attachment point from here that would wrap around, come down the center, and pass the bar right here through the exhaust, and then actually mount to the same place that these mount up to right here where the pegs would be on like another, like on one of the scooters. And then that would be a nice, real solid attachment setup. I think that's more similar to what the guy with the monkey has done on his. But yeah, the rest of it was just, you know, I just bought metal and cut it and welded to whatever size I wanted. If I could, I would probably make the bottom a little bit longer, because I thought it'd be a good idea to have the top a little bit wider so that way you can get stuff in and out. But I've had a few things that would hit the back and fall out the back. So, and I also have a kind of a tub. It's really, really cheap and kind of just stuck together, but I'm trying to train my dogs to ride, so this is a little bit of a way to keep them from putting a paw through the holes and breaking a limb. But it's also worked to just kind of throw stuff in and not have to strap it down. It's really easy to bolt on. Just kind of, yeah, take it, slide it in right here in the front. It's kind of hard to do with just one hand, but drop it in like that, and then also take out that cargo net, but it just drops right in. And then I have 2 little quick release pins back here that hold it on. So now the thing I don't like about this is this does drastically limit my top speed. I think whenever I had it on there, I could barely get over like 45. Most of the time I was like stuck around 42. So basically you're a scooter at that point. And where I ride, most of the roads are like 45, 55 miles an hour. So I was kind of limiting traffic. One time I did take it out for one of my runs, but yeah. So I guess next up, I'll wait for this rain to stop, and then I'll try and get some footage of me riding it so you can actually see it in action. Oh, one other thing on the suspension. I don't recommend using this type of setup unless that's just what you have around, because this linkage is actually designed to have a little bit of play in it. So you can see it kind of has a little bit of a flex to it. So I guess it helps with if your alignment's off a little bit. It doesn't affect the handling as much, but it does let it flex a little bit whenever you actually put some weight in it. Yeah, so once again, this is all just kind of, I built it with what I had, so I kind of have some limitations. If I were to start building these, I'd actually build a full entire linkage swing arm assembly that had its own pivot bearings that were, you know, not these flex type. You can see how much the linkage is actually flexing right there, because it's actually like a rubber mount essentially instead of a clamped on bearing. So anyway, just a few things to note. All right, next up, I'll get some ride time on it and let y'all see. All right, so it stopped raining. The ground's still wet, but I'm just gonna take it for a quick little loop down the road and come back on the street, get it up to about 45 or so, just to show y'all. Away, back in, just like an old bike. Like I said, you really don't even hardly notice it on the once you roll. Same road on just the bike, I could easily do like 35. Here goes the higher speed. GoPro mount location is okay for seeing everything. Let's go down here and do a little figure eight real quick. Or I guess yeah. See if I can pull a figure eight here. Problem. You can actually turn wheel actually sits perfectly still on the whenever you're doing a right-hand turn. A little bit sketchy right here because of all the gravel, but alright, I'm gonna set the camera up over here and hopefully y'all can get a third-person view. That's it. Hope that answers any questions y'all have.